Okay. With computer sound, share, done. Okay. You can see that quite well, can't you, Pierre?
Yep.
Okay, fine. Let's begin. So I'm from CIRCE, and so is David Zambrana. We're a research center for energy, resource, and consumption. So David, he is a technology project manager. He's from the Energy Environment Group, and inside the area of industry and energy, we're the key project contacts for Reno, and we were invited here under sort of the banner of Reno Project. And I'm a project manager. Reno is not a project we coordinate, but we coordinate many other projects. And I'm under the management unit. So CIRCE is devoted mostly to energy. It started as with electricity and has sort of developed into other areas of sustainable development. The idea is that we try and get technology transfer from these sort of public projects and other innovation and research to market actors, basically, so that we can achieve sustainability objectives. Some quick figures about the company. So we get a lot of European research projects. How does it work? Well, European policy regulations are designed to change the motivations of business and change where value can be found, if you like. So they change that makeup. And then there are funding opportunities that come through directed calls with specific goals. And that sort of funding opportunities seek to multiply the changes brought about by policy and regulation, so creating a faster rate of change. The projects are assessed and funded in what is a bit like a tender process. So how do you set up a project? Well, you might look for some new market opportunities or technology opportunities, and then you put together a multidisciplinary team that crosses country boundaries, usually we're across the whole of Europe. And so you have your consortium, and then you devise a project which is, carries out some technical or market investigations and some real life demonstrations to prove value. And that's basically the context of it. And I mean, in the context of that, companies like ours can grow. So talking directly to the topic matter today, which is sustainability goal 11. Of course, there are 7 sustainable development goals, and 11 is just one of them. In CIRCE, we concentrate on some others as well, 4, 7, 9, and 12. What is sustainability? Sustainable cities and communities. Well, the goal, in a very shorthand, is to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. If you think of the context of Europe, we would probably say that most cities in Europe are, in many respects, inclusive and safe. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on the sustainable aspect, but as well maybe a little bit on the resilient aspect as it pertains to electricity, because that's more what CIRCE does. So the key points for Europe, I think, are probably reducing energy and material consumption, decreasing pollution, and increasing urban resilience. And as I said, this talk is in the context of public projects and technology transfer to private industry. I don't want to forget, however, I guess what the global goals are. And I mean, if you look at third world countries, their goal is going to be slightly different to what we have. If you don't have access to adequate housing, then that would be one of your key goals. In Europe, I think we're trying to maintain our standard of living and extend it perhaps slightly to be even better. But the key is reducing the costs of our standard of living. And some of the cities there you probably recognize, at least one of them. I've got Barcelona, a view from my balcony, and a picture of Melbourne on the bottom there as well. And at the top, I guess some of the places where maybe they're more focused on other aspects, not the aspects that are focused on Europe, although that would be part of it, but initially other aspects. Activity lines within CIRCE that speak to the sustainability and development goal. All our activity lines speak to the goal in the context of cities, I think. So renewable energy, future electric grids, smart mobility, Industry 4.0, energy efficiency, circular economy, and sustainability. So they all sort of can contribute to the goal. I'm going to now speak, I guess, on the 3 points I made above. So these 3 points: reduce energy material consumption, decrease pollution, and increase urban resilience, in the context of what we do at Fundación CIRCE. So reducing energy material consumption and wastage, well, I see that as being about energy materials efficiency and whole of life cycle product improvement, and noting that energy materials are inextricably linked throughout their full life cycle. So some of the things at CIRCE: industrial monitoring and Industry 4.0 and improvement of energy and material efficiency. So using data to very carefully control systems and looking for gains in efficiency of both energy and material. Full life cycle analysis of products across multiple variables: energy and carbon, other forms of pollution, monetary, social, health, environmental dimension. So not just the monetary dimension, looking at the other dimensions as well. Although, you know, if you focus on some of those other dimensions, then the monetary dimension comes out by itself, especially where policy gives costs to those other dimensions. Energy efficiency across the whole energy supply and demand system. That's just about energy networks from big to small. You know, the traditional ways supply and demand and very linear. You have energy production at a big power plant. It goes down the line to the house where it's used. The idea is to try and change that model. Decreasing pollution. So decreasing material waste and pollution from energy use and generation, and looking for potential value in waste streams. So it's related, of course. So renewable energy and storage and increasing its use. If you want to increase the penetration of renewable energy in the network, you have to increase storage capability. And you also need to look at the stability of the network in the context of having more renewables, because renewables aren't something you can turn on and off like a traditional power plant. Whole of network efficiency, smart grids using data and information and communications technology. I think the latest speaker will have more detail on that than I do. But it's about using new developments in data technology and control even to make the networks smarter and reduce losses. Electrical vehicle integration into energy systems, fast charging, bidirectional charging, use of electrical vehicle batteries as part of grid infrastructure. To reduce pollution in cities, if people are still going to have personal vehicles, then electrical vehicles are great, but they put another demand on the electrical system. And the idea is to try and use them to actually help the stability of the electricity network by drawing from an owner's battery during points of need, if you like, and compensating the owner of the vehicle for that use. And the last one, waste biomass as an energy stream. That's another thing we do at CIRCE. Waste biomass. So let's get that clear. I mean, there's been a little bit on the news lately about cutting down forests to produce power. We're talking about waste biomass. So biomass that ordinarily is burnt anyway in the fields as a waste product. How can we create value streams and create energy from that, whether it's district heating or producing biofuels or even electricity. Increasing urban resilience. So creating urban systems and infrastructure that can adapt to changes. So there's two pictures here. You know, if we look at, we think of this traditional house here with their electricity, with their solar panel, they've bypassed the grid entirely. Okay, our old system is supply and demand, but if your transmission line is broken or something happens, then that's it. The whole city is without electricity. That's not going away anytime soon, but the idea is to try and create some local resilience within that. So in Spain, we have apartment buildings, for example. Perhaps the apartment building has some solar panels on the roof. And at some points during the day, for example, a hot day, you might be producing a lot of solar electricity and can use that electricity within that building to run the air conditioners that cool that building. So you've created a little sort of resilient system which can connect to the other systems as well. And the more interconnectivity you get, then the more resilient the system is, of course, with the correct controls and things like that. But you need data to make that happen. And the data infrastructure and data transactions are something that is an interesting research area. And that allows people to not just be consumers, but to be producers of electricity as well, or prosumers is the term used now. And the last one, which David's going to speak more on, driving renovation to increase the number of energy efficient buildings capable of withstanding hotter, colder temperatures with less energy input. Challenges and solutions. Well, the big challenges, industry inertia across all industries and markets. How do you solve that problem? Well, you need to provide some validated business ideas through real life demonstration, show the monetary value. And a lot of these public projects are directed at doing that. Policy which can restrict innovative market opportunities that could further the objectives. Well, carry out, a lot of the projects have in-depth policy studies sort of attached to them, or some kind of policy study attached to them. And you know, with that, you can provide suggestions that come out of the project, and or as an organisation, so say lobbies as well for changes. Broad range of changing variables across Europe: climate, social, political, renewable, or other energy potential, technological. So that's just about the differences throughout Europe, and the fact that you need to have local solutions, but you need to try and have a generalizable framework. So whatever you do in one area can be in some sense applied to an area where you haven't done a local study. And that's all for me. I'm going to hand over to David now.
Okay.
Are you there, David?
Thank you. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me well?
Yes. Would you like me to keep scrolling through the slides for you? Or you've requested? Fine. Approved.
I requested. Thank you very much.
You have control.
Thank you. And good morning, or good afternoon in this case. I'm David Zambrana, and I will explain a little bit more in deep. I mean, from the concepts that Leon told you before, about the role of the buildings in general, on the way of making our cities and communities more sustainable. As you might know, Europe's building stock represents more or less half or EU primary energy consumption, and more than a third of this CO2 emissions. This is a very representative sector in terms of energy and CO2 emissions. Therefore, this sector is crucial for the achievement of the EU energy and environmental goals, also the SDG goals. So nowadays, because all these objectives comes from the past, and different actions were done around Europe and many private and public projects. But now the priority is to design and the construction of new or retrofit the existing buildings as zero emission, zero pollution, positive energy buildings, and also integrated in sustainable green neighborhoods. But in order to understand better those concepts, I would like to show you with this figure how we establish the different concepts about, let's say, zero energy buildings. As you can see here, life cycle zero energy buildings could represent those buildings which actually the consumption of primary energy, which is represented in this axis, it also can be equal to the embodied energy, the analyzed embodied energy of different materials used, and also energy systems can be the traditional ones or renewable ones. So in this case, looking at this figure, a typical building could be in this point at the top, which is with a high energy consumption, but with, let's say, low embodied energy with the traditional materials. If we looked at the low energy building, which spend a little bit more in, let's say, embodied energy in systems, especially and also with other new materials, insulation ones, for example, we can reduce the amount of energy consumption, but we will increase the embodied energy. If we look at the very low energy buildings during use phase of those, we will see that we need to increase the embodied energy, which means also the embodied CO2 emissions, to reduce the energy consumption. In some point, we will have buildings that the energy consumption can be zero, but in this case, we have increased the embodied energy with renewable energy systems. We can have the positive energy buildings, which is this one below, that we can see that we have increased the embodied energy, but also we have not only goes zero energy consumption, but also we are producing energy. But to produce this energy, we need to interact with the neighborhood. In this case, we need interconnections. We need other systems that can use this plus energy during the lifetime of the building. If we look at the life cycle zero energy building, we need to combine different activities, different options and strategies. And we need a balance between the production of materials, let's say to use materials with low environmental impact and low embodied energy, to see on the energy and material consumption during the construction and also the refurbishment of the buildings. It is not only on the first, let's say, construction of the initial building, but also we need to refurbish those ones that already exist. And also we need to use the natural resources and also local resources. So we need to include the energy, renewable energy systems and also interconnections. Some actions that goes beyond those energy efficient and also renewable energy goes to the reuse and the recycling of the materials at the end of life to minimize all transportations from the materials and products from the beginning and to promote the use of resources available in local areas. It just means that you use, let's say, materials that can be produced locally. In this case, we need to see the whole picture from a life cycle perspective, not only on the use phase, but also considering the production, construction, and the end of life phases. So in this case, the life cycling thinking approach can be some kind of decision-making tool to select the best available technologies, minimizing the environmental impacts, and also to increasing the value of the property. So we need to transform our building stock from this big energy consumer and also big CO2 emission sector to a key element to achieve the SDG goals and also European goals on more efficient buildings, which is the improvement of the use phase of the buildings, but also to think more in the life cycle sustainability. Because it is not only matters of environmental, but also we need to include economic and social perspectives. In terms of the life cycle assessment, this means that to have the environmental life cycle assessment, life cycle cost, and also social life cycle assessment. To have the complete view of, let's say, the picture and to talk about sustainability itself. This is the concept that we will use on the basis of a project which is called RENO. RENO is an European 2020 project we had started last year, and where we put the focus on the refurbishment of the existing buildings. As you might know, more than 220 million buildings were built before 2001 with generally poor energy performance. So it means that they need some refurbishments to improve the energy efficiency, but also the rate of the deep renovation is very low. It's 0.2%, which is very, very low in comparison to the European goals of renovation. So the main objective of the Reno project is to help to drastically accelerate this value, this rate of deep renovation, and only focusing in different technologies to increase the energy efficiency of the buildings, and also to contribute to this rate with a medium-term ambition, which is 3.5% yearly renovation of the building stock, which is actually, it's very, very ambitious. How we do that? Basically, I can resume this in this figure. Working with key stakeholders, working not only with the building professionals or the owners of the buildings or the users, but also including the innovation professionals, technology providers, organizations, small, medium companies, the big ones, also to energy auditors, to include other actors as financial individuals, financial institutions and investors, and to work all together with a centric user approach on some business model innovations, and also on working in different stages of the retrofitting of a building. In this case, on the planning, which is mainly the design, the retrofitting itself, which is also the construction part of the installation of the systems, but also to monitor the different innovations, let's say, to see if all the information that we can get from monitoring system is already installed and that will be installed in demonstrators can support to decision making during the whole life cycle of the building. In this case, in this project, we promote different product innovations, basically development solution, renewable energy system, hybrid and storage solutions, not only thermal, but also electrical ones. Some process innovation, most devoted to, let's say, the installations time, and also the installation amount of money, and also the spend on the materials and let's say workers and so on, to establish a set of ICT tools, in this case, not only for the assessment, but also for monitoring, and also to establish some data information, let's say, cloud that we can connect with the building itself, also to have the different, let's say, inputs from the stakeholders, and to monitor this data along the life cycle of a building. In this case, the idea is to have an optimizer renovation roadmap using those tools, the combination of these tools, and to try to pass from, let's say, an old building that needs to be renovated in a very efficient way. In this case, this is Reno. It's a building level approach. I will show you to passing from buildings to urban level, which is the positive project, which is also an European project, which is CIRCE participating in this project, based on the concept of passing from positive energy buildings to a positive city transformation framework, seen as the combination of the buildings. So we'll show you a little bit, a very short video about it. I don't know if Leon, can you click on play, please, for me, because I cannot do it now. Leon, are you there, or? I cannot.
If you give me control back, David, I will.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I cannot.
I'm going to remote control. I'm going.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I was about to get control.
Let's see if you put them in the video.
Okay. It worked before. Let's see.
I don't know.
No, it doesn't want to work, David.
Okay, I mean, it was short only to show the concept of the positive project, but in any case, it's available also on the web page, so you can go directly to positive project web page. I think this is the last, so we are open to questions.
Thank you very much, David and Leon. That was a very interesting presentation. I've seen lots of interesting of tweets about your talk already, flying all over the place. So I think that definitely attracted the interest of the audience. For our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of the screen. While we wait for the audience, I think I have a question that might be useful, maybe to expand a bit more on this this topic, because maybe most of the audience might not be familiar with this concept. But what are the key challenges of renovating a building versus building an energy efficient building from scratch? Say, what's the difference there?
The difference could be there. The main difference is that from existing buildings, we have, let's say, the embodied energy. It's there. I mean, we can start from the beginning, from, let's say, rebuilding a new building. I mean, if you compare a new building against a retrofitted one. But the idea is to use the existing one in terms of energy and CO2 emissions. It's less, let's say, expensive is not the word, but it's less impact than a new one because of materials. Because the use of, let's say, traditional materials, that bricks and in some cases stones and so on, ceramics ones, can be, let's say, integrated with other new solutions, and can, let's say, maintain the embodied energy and also emissions. So in my case, it is better to the retrofit, but for sure, if you are going to build a new one, at least we need to cover the life cycle of assessment of the building, not only to focus on the use phase, which is actually, it's very easy to be less than zero if you integrate renewable energies and so on. The key element is how to reduce the embodied energy, or how to compensate the embodied emissions on the materials, which is part of circular economy concept and goes beyond of that. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And we have a question here from Harry. He's asking, how much a role does nuclear energy play in meeting sustainable goals for powering cities?
Do you want me to take that one, David?
No, please go ahead.
Within CIRCE, we don't concentrate on nuclear energy. I'll be very clear. Of course, there are some countries in Europe that have more nuclear energy capability than others. I think France is a common example of a country that has a lot of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy has its ups and downs, doesn't it? And after the disaster in Japan, it had a very big down. If it's well managed, it seems to work well. But you know, this is a bigger question that comes into policy and I guess the general ideas of the population. And if you look at the general opinion of the population at the moment, they're not in favor of nuclear energy in general. So that is probably an answer to your question.
All right, thank you. And then Neil is asking, what are the barriers being faced in implementing these projects on a large scale?
From my perspective, the technological part is, I mean, we have technology solutions to face on a large scale, but some cultural barriers are quite, let's say, high in terms of how to integrate the different stakeholders in the value chain. Because from the technological point of view, for sure, there are some, let's say, barriers, but I think from my point of view, the cultural and social ones are the biggest. So we need to work really close to the people, not only the users, but also the different stakeholders and institutions that can, let's say, invest on this kind of projects. Also, for sure, local governments are a key part of this transition. But we need to believe that we need believe in some kind of common goal, which is sustainability. And we need to be part of this, not only from the technology providers or material providers and so on. Yeah. I don't know if you can add, if you want to add something, Leon.
No, I think that's quite a good answer, David. I mean, on a large scale, it's about changing industry inertia. So, and how do you get markets to change? Well, there's some policy levers that governments can pull to make it more attractive. Renovation, for example. But on the other hand, if you're asking private industry to carry out the renovation, then you need to show that a private company can make a profit. And that's sort of, to me, probably where the biggest barrier lies. And I mean, if you look at Spain as well, there are some barriers just with the way people live. If you live in an entire apartment building, then you need the owners of every single apartment to agree to a renovation. That's a different circumstance to an individual house owner who has his own house and can pay for his own renovation and receive all the benefits himself. So, I mean, they vary, but that would be what I would add to the discussion.
Yeah, I think it's definitely contingent. Say the challenges are definitely contingent on different situations, but I think what we can say that at the moment, for example, the European Union has put a lot of funding around these projects, and the idea is that these allow researchers and allow consortia to prove that these approaches work and generate value for different stakeholders, so that we can actually communicate those results, and that should help changing help reducing the cultural barriers and so that more people get on board with these changes, I guess. We have more questions, but I'm conscious of time, so we'll probably keep them for the end of this session. So I will pass this to Dirk Ahlers, Senior Researcher and Project Manager at CityxChange at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Dirk, thanks for joining us today. You should be able to share your screen and to start your talk when you're ready.
Yes, thanks. You should see my screen now.
Yep.
Very good. Welcome everyone, and thanks Piangelo for the very kind invitation. So my name is Dirk. I work at the Smart Sustainable Cities Group at NTNU, which is the largest university in Norway. We are located in Trondheim, which is kind of 1/3 of the way towards the north. And I'm going to talk about transition processes and some parts of digital transformation in smart sustainable cities. I work in kind of a mixed way, but kind of between the chairs. So I work at the Department for Architecture and Planning. My background is in computer science. I'm the research manager for this group, and I'm running or supporting quite a lot of projects here and there, but my main project is a large smart city project. I give an example of that later. So I'm trying to combine all these different viewpoints into something that makes sense. And it also came out in the presentation from David and Leon before, of how to actually make things work, how to look at all these different views. And that's something that our group is also trying very strongly on. So a little bit ICT and a little bit more general background. And to share something, this is a very nice picture of Trondheim. A very nice aerial picture from autumn. It looks much more snowy now. And if you look at this, can you see if it's a smart city? And well, it has our university up there, so that should be a hub of smartness. But a lot of the things that we think make up a smart city don't really show up here. So at least it looks nice and it's like in good repair, but quite a lot of the smart city approaches are on infrastructure. They are in how the city is organized, how the citizens can participate, and quite a lot you might not see in this very high level view. It's kind of on the infrastructure level or at the relationship level, so not quite visible in this way. How do we find that out? What do we do in our projects on that? And just briefly, also a lot of things have been discussed in the presentation before, so I don't have to repeat everything, but of course we are also working around with the SDGs. These have been adopted also by our university as general guiding principles. I've highlighted number 11 here and then a few that are related there, especially also around affordable and clean energy, around climate action, about consumption and production, and clean water, but all the other ones fit in here as well. And there is one picture that I kind of like more to get this connection out, which on the left side here is this kind of donut or cake view, which puts a lot of these things we talk about kind of on the middle level, on the society level, linked then to the economy on top and the whole biosphere environment on the bottom. And this helps a bit to see that none of these they are not necessarily ordered. In a way, they all relate to each other to actually get their main impact out. And if you go into the details, SDG 11 has also more detailed targets within it. Few people maybe have looked at this. It's quite interesting to actually look at what the individual targets are and then what the individual indicators on these actually are. And as the previous presentation also said, a lot of these might not quite make sense for the rather rich Central European approach, but we still should look at these and consider these, of course, worldwide, and also to understand how they shape our thinking, how they shape the pieces where we think innovation is happening or where things are interesting or novel, which things that are taken for granted for us might be still quite new or quite relevant and quite useful in other places on the world. And for that also, we have a number of projects where we collaborate with other places in other countries. We have a strong collaboration with China. We have in the department a strong collaboration with India as well, to also exchange students, to exchange student groups, etc., to bring these additional ideas out. Because if you live in Norway for a bit too long, also it becomes, your views can get a bit disturbed, because we are a quite rich country here. But on the other side, we try to look at that in our work also, as we can be kind of the trailblazer, we can be the expensive lab for things that should be scaled out further out. And of course, in part of our work is also really scaling out and replication. So actually what we do can have a wider impact than just in a rather small country in Europe. Coming back to what we then actually do within individual cities. There are different strategies of what smart cities should be, what different people think about it, how cities deal with this. I'm not giving a specific definition. There are lots of definitions flying around. We have an operational one, but what is happening under this quite often is something around sustainable and livable urban futures. How do we make the cities more livable? What we work in our group also is open innovation and co-creation, so enable larger participation by larger groups that have good ideas that should be part of the solutions that we build. We want to build open ecosystems for those solutions, also not only driven by the municipality, but by other stakeholders around that as well. A smart city doesn't mean that everything needs to be done by the municipality or even should be done. So how do we open this up? How do we make sure that a lot of different solutions can come in and provide some additional benefit without having to need this strong connection between all the components? This kind of goes now towards the ICT view. But also overall, it's about change processes. It's about enabling urban change towards environmental challenges, economical, societal, technical ones. And we want to increase the sustainability, of course. We want to increase livability, or at least maintain it. And also we need to work on resilience with the changes that are coming up. And then the more normal ones are like, you need to improve the services or enable new services. There's a lot around digital transformation that's happening where just existing processes should be made better, but also new processes are enabled, or new ways of thinking about processes can happen. And then also a lot of data from the cities, real-time city understanding, and so on. And again, there we are focused on scalable and transferable solutions. So things that don't just work in the one specific context. And also on the combination of low and high-tech solutions. It doesn't necessarily help to just put sensors and data on everything after it has been built. Some measures can be done very early in processes that have quite a high impact, where this needs to be integrated, where we might not need very high-tech solutions for individual buildings, but we might need high-tech solutions for the planning processes, the urban planning for certain areas. And then we are also looking at integrated solutions. So again, not only the ICT parts, but all the other ones as well. Technologically, ICT, environmental, societal, all these challenges and all these solutions, bring them really together. And then taking a slightly higher view, a lot of this around smart city is about handling complexity. And then it's also about, again, handling these change processes. How do we evolve the city under the smart city label? How about smart city development? And cities are naturally complex, and these integrated solutions are hard, interoperable solutions are hard, but they are the ones that get us forward, that keep also the systems open enough that new players can come in, that they are adaptable to future needs. So we want to keep the flexibility and enable experimentation as far as that's possible. This slide, just very quickly, that there is kind of a mirroring of how a city evolves in terms of urban renewable, redevelopment, urban innovation, and on the other side, how you evolve software architectures, how you evolve whole enterprise architectures, how you evolve the ecosystems on the ICT and the technology side within cities, so that we can arrive at a kind of co-evolution of these different strands. There are more, this is just a very simplified version. And as also was mentioned already before, there are a lot of stakeholders and context boundaries that are in here. We have the municipality, we have the citizens, we have lots of companies, we have NGOs, we have the European Union, we have national actors, we have the regulators, etc. So whatever we do here, these technical solutions, also the societal solutions, don't operate in a vacuum. You get better solutions if you consider all these stakeholders, or only by considering these, you are actually able to build these solutions and to set them up, because otherwise you might have forgotten a stakeholder here, or you might have forgotten the regulator or something else that then blocks solutions later, or at least makes them much more inefficient than you could otherwise do. And this is one area we're also working quite strongly on. And one way to do that is the Quadruple Helix innovation model. This means that you get at least 4 areas to the table, which is then government, the national or the local one of the city, then industry, which happens quite often already, and then on the additional ones, academia, like universities, research institutes, etc., and civil society, to have this more participatory innovation approach. This is also not quite easy to do, but again, it makes the solutions much better, and in some cases, it only enables an actual useful solution that is not just being built once, but that actually then gets picked up and taken forward. And I'm going to show quickly a few project examples where we are working on this. The first one is positive CityxChange. This is similar to the positive project that David showed before. This is a lighthouse project funded by the EU, and we are also developing positive energy blocks or districts with a number of European cities. So here you see in Norway, that is Trondheim, that's where I'm sitting at the moment. Then Limerick in Ireland, which is close to where I guess most of you are. And then we have 5 additional cities spread across Europe to then replicate and adapt our solutions, so we can also show that they work in different contexts, in different regulation contexts, in different environmental contexts. And we have something that actually can bring the overall European energy transition and the overall energy ambitions and emission ambitions of the EU forward. The way we are doing that is to integrate local renewable energy into city districts and into blocks in kind of a puzzle piece, so we can scale this up. For us, a positive energy district then is really a process, not a state. And the idea there is that we have areas in the city that generate more electricity that they need themselves, at least on an annual average, so they can exchange energy, both electric and thermal, with the rest of the grid inside the city and grow while doing it. And also includes items such as electromobility. So why is the energy need there? A lot of it comes from the buildings themselves, some comes from the infrastructure. And then mobility is also quite a large factor. So that can also be taken into this consideration of where do we get the energy for the needs that actually arise from the specific area we're looking at. And then we have a number of small points around here of all the different individual demo projects that we're doing, which are on the technical side. They are on innovation playgrounds like City as a Lab. They are on the regulatory bits of how can we make sure that what we're doing here actually can be done after the project as well. A lot of the energy trading that we're trying to do, also that the EU is mandating, is not yet really made into regulations and laws. So it's kind of a gray area, and we are pushing them there also to see how should this be shaped to be of public use. Of course, we have also lots of work on the investment side, because this all costs quite a lot of money. And so how can we make this work better, have better value for money, have lower return on investment, or also look at not just the monetary value, but also other types of value that come out of that, which is a lot of where cities are motivated to do things. There is more stuff on this on our website as well. I'm just jumping over this. I will not explain everything in detail. That would be another lecture. One item I would like to highlight, this is a map of the core area in Trondheim where we're working with, which has multiple urban innovation spaces dotted across the city in the main areas that we're working with. These are urban living labs. These are specific innovation playgrounds or innovation labs where people can come and interact with the project, with the different stakeholders that are in there, with the city, with the industry players, to develop the solutions together, to get insight of why these things are happening, what that means for themselves, how they can be part of it, how they can contribute their own ideas of how they would like this to be taken forward. So it's overall about what innovation potential do we have in a city? How can we use that potential? How can we get the ideas of the citizens that we have to work with anyway? Because otherwise these solutions will not be taken forward. So to make sure this all works, we need buy-in from a lot of different people here, but also we don't just want only the passive, yes, that's fine, or no, I don't want that, but really bringing these additional ideas in to try to make the solutions fit better. And also we don't think that we know everything. So this is quite an important way to also check the solutions we are building here. Coming back to the ICT side, this is a simplified overview of the overall ecosystem approach that we have with different players here, with different demo projects. You don't need to understand all the details here. The main thing is on the business services layer, you have the different demo project that we have ranging from urban planning over the electricity grid, over electric mobility to investments and all these components. And we are building this in a way that it is a rather open ecosystem. So it's running at different partners in here. It's not just the one municipality that runs this or that has to run it all, but that the interaction between these systems is supported in the best way. So this can also grow and this can be taken forward. And for the replication we want to do with our additional fellow cities, there is also a way to pick and choose individual parts that do make sense, that they don't have yet in their local systems. So we don't just have this one monolithic block, which will not work for the replication approach that we foresee. And one other thing, going back to the structural approach here, is something that's called the Bold City Vision Framework. It has a better subtitle on SDG transition framework. This is a way for the cities to go from the positive energy blocks up to a positive energy district, and then hopefully up to a positive energy city by 2050, which is also in line with the timelines that the European Commission has for the European energy transition. And then we have a number of support structures for that, which then has been developed by the project and by the cities into a grid of different activities and different topics that cover a lot of what happens within a city and the different areas that a city needs to work on to become energy positive, to reduce the emissions. Most of these documents are available on our website already, or they will be soon. I added the links here. This is a very interesting document because it works mostly on the strategy level of linking the different levels of strategy down from the very local ones on urban plans for a new urban district development up to the European plans of Europe should be energy positive by 2050. So this also navigates this, this rather strong background on the strategy level. A few smaller project examples then. There is something small we're doing on campus to analyze the movement based on the Wi-Fi coverage we have. This is all anonymized data, and it tries to understand a bit better how the campus is used, where people move, how they move between different buildings to try to optimize the way that the campus or the buildings on it is run. Of course, from the last year, there was not much data, so this is a bit older to understand where we have options to do something like this. We had a previous other project that was very much focused on local emissions, where we tried to build up low-cost emission sensing within the city by rather low-cost sensors that we basically installed at different places in Trondheim and in Vejle, a Danish small municipality. So the left one, it's my favorite. We put that up to right on the official measurement station, which has extremely expensive and validated equipment in there. We added it to traffic lights or to street lights to get some data out of this and to understand how much we can actually use this to understand emissions better, and then to feed it back into the cities to understand better for them what impact some of their actions have. It was a bit of a mixed result. We got some results out of the particle matter. Some of the other sensors we had there were rather vague and didn't have any direct significant results that could be applied. We are continuing a little bit on this, but by now there are also additional projects like this coming up that make this all a bit easier and go more towards really productization of installations like that. Last project example is the Trondheim 3.0 University City Corporation. This is a strategic collaboration between the city and the university. to work on a number of different topics, to cross different silos. One of the topics there is also smart cities. Another one is, for example, health or education, because both the university and the city are really large organizations with lots of individual silos that have a lot to bring to each other, but they might not quite know that. So this tries to open up the silos on both sides and share solutions and problems and initiatives. So then what next? We have a known problem. This is the CO2 density in the atmosphere. And if you've read the latest news, also the last year, 2020, with COVID and the lockdowns haven't really changed that trajectory significantly. So this is still there. We need to get our emissions down. We need to get the climate change in some way under control to try to reach the 1.5 degrees Paris goals, while at the moment we are rushing towards the 2 degree of warming. So a lot of things have been said and written in the last year about COVID and what it means for cities or for smart cities. And in the end, post-crisis for COVID-19 will be then during the ongoing crisis of climate change. So what can we learn from what has happened now? What has worked, what has not worked? Which structures can we take forward to apply them to climate actions? Again, the lockdowns have barely brought the emissions down. So even if the COVID response seems like a massive change in terms of the overall emissions and the climate change, it doesn't make a big dent. So we need a game changer on a massive scale to actually be able to address that issue. So then the next step would be also, how do we link climate action and any COVID recovery that is coming up? How do we link that to the European Green Deal, which wants to achieve climate neutrality for the whole of Europe by 2050? And this also opens up some ideas on the new role of livable urban spaces, where with the year of intermittent lockdowns in different ways, we've seen that we perceive the city and its spaces very different. We perceive mobility very different. There has been quite a lot of push for digitalization, and without any previous digitalization, we wouldn't even have the online meeting here now. So this has changed a lot of things, but it hasn't changed it yet enough. So we have to build a better world with much better structures to be able to deal with the overall climate change challenge that is still there and not going away. And the way to do the action there needs to be a really broad societal action that comes from all levels of society. And one thing to highlight here is that it needs to be both the systemic action and the individual one. Quite often solutions are proposed that put all the blame or the responsibility on the individuals who all have limited ability to do things. So there needs to be a very broad systemic action to do these things, and the individual action then of course as well, but it cannot be just put on either side of the circle here. So these are dependent on each other, but that needs to be really strongly understood, especially by systemic actors that try to push all the blame down to the individuals. Then to show just a few closing examples, this is something from the lockdowns last year. The left picture is something from New York, where people reclaimed the streets to have outdoor spaces because you couldn't sit indoors. The right side is an example from Berlin, where pop-up bike paths, bike lanes were set up to enable people to get around better, to make it safer for them, and to just make space to go around on bikes instead of the cars. So some of these things just also show that a change of small things can help, and some systemic support for actually like bike paths and larger mobility changes are going to help in this specific situation, and can be thought forward of how does that mean, what does that mean for our larger impact. Going a bit on the negative side, there are some nice digital books. The left is a nice collection of mini dystopias. What would happen if we run a city like Amazon, and similar dystopias, which also very nicely make some of the assumptions explicit of what can go wrong, so we know how to fix it. And then also one item that comes up all the time here is the digital rights to the city. What happens with our data? What about all the surveillance that comes up? How can we deal with that? How can we build better systems with that? And then to close, this is something a bit happier. This is one book called Happy City. This is a bit older. The subtitle is Transforming Our Lives Through Urban Design. So this is a nice approach of how to bring this forward. And the other one is a book from last year from Mariana Mazzucato, who has also been rather influential in shaping the new European Union mission approach to things. This looks at changing the overall structure of the economy and, as it says here, a guide to changing capitalism. So really to look very deep at the overall structures, societal and business and capitalism that are there that can be used. So we don't just look at individual profits on a monetary level, but we look at what does this mean for the society? How do we build solutions? How do we build societal structures in a way that they actually prefer the common good, and they make us actually find viable ways to deal with climate change. That's it from me. Quick takeaways here. Smart cities are really interesting and a challenging topic. It needs to be addressed interdisciplinary, and it's mostly about evolution and transition processes. It's smart city as a process, not a state. We should make our cities more livable and sustainable anyway. And there are quite a lot of new opportunities and requirements arising, a lot of new thinking coming around this. And currently what is also there then is the very strong imperatives for sustainability and resilience. And with that, I'm through. There are all the contact information here, and I'm very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I think lots of interesting things to think about. So for our audience, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature that you see at the bottom of the screen. And while we wait for questions, I have a question of my own. So one of your slides, you kind of designed a potential timeline for moving from a from a positive block to a positive district to a positive city, or to smart block, smart district to smart cities. And the timeline said districts should be feasible by 2024, 2030, and smart cities 2030, 2050. So it's still a long way to go, despite the fact that we've been talking about smart cities for a very long time already. But do you see any particular factor or any set of different potential factors that can either speed up or slow down this process?
Yeah, so the overall goal here of 2050, that is part of the European energy transition. That's part of the very high level strategy that we should have positive energy cities by then. And then earlier on the individual positive energy blocks and districts, and to scale it out, and to also have some of these already much earlier, but by 2050, as the whole European Union should be there, so we should only have positive energy cities by then. So that's kind of an individual step also for cities that will, of course, have this done earlier, hopefully. And also the goal for 2050 is rather late if we want to keep the 1.5 degree Paris goal. So a lot of this needs to be accelerated, and in many cases, we know what we have to do. We know how to generate cleaner energy. It's a money problem. In other places, it's still a problem of getting the right local stakeholders together, as also Leon mentioned before. So it's not that there is one single barrier that stops us from doing that. It's a mix. The monetary one is large, but it's not the only one. So we can also look at this as the energy side of things. If we look at smart cities, that term develops a lot over time. If you look back 5 or 10 years, people understand something very different. It moves away from this pure technocratic or this pure ICT view on like the integration of the different aspects of what makes a city. And I think also last year we learned a lot of what sort of things we like about our cities or we dislike. So this is, it's a changing topic, and it evolves also with the expected, with the current needs and requirements that are there and with what the technology can offer. So this is also a way to at least to guide the energy parts of it towards something. And yes, ideally to have the energy transition done much earlier. So we are actually keeping within the 1.5 degree goal, because if we only get all the positive energy cities by 2050, that's not ideal, to say the least. So it needs to be staged out, which means mostly accelerating it and doing it much, much earlier.
All right. And in the context of smart cities and sustainability, is there any particular city in the world that can be looked at as the reference point at the moment?
I don't think so. There are lots of cities that have something you can learn across in many places, but there is not the one solution that really fits everything. We see that in many cases, people or cities want very targeted and very tailored solutions, which might be a bit beside the point. There should be standardization of these solutions. So what we try here is to build standardized solutions, but we are here now one of 18 European lighthouse projects that overall work with something like 80 cities. So there should be commonalities between them and these solutions. Not each project will have their solution being rolled out Europe-wide, but it might find its different niches where it fits, and some of them will not work, some of them will be merged with what other projects are doing. And then of course there is also quite a strong push from other cities, from a lot of industry partners. So I think it's not ideal to look at the one solution that fixes everything, because the problems are so varied. But you can hopefully standardize a little bit, at least. We know that some solutions that will work for Barcelona don't work for Trondheim, or they are just not applicable. And in some cases the other way around, but to find the commonalities is the key to be able to replicate and scale this up quickly.
Right, and then trying to make a connection between, say, another connection between your presentation and what we discussed earlier about energy and so building, retrofitting, and so on. So my gut feeling is that most of these, say, test beds are in the newest part of these cities. So the first question is this the case? And are there particular challenges trying to include the historical parts of the cities into these kind of projects and these kind of tests?
Yes, we are all a little bit guilty of that. I think we are using test cases that have new buildings in to make it a bit easier and to achieve something. Positive as a project, they might answer separately later. They are also looking specifically at historic cities or historic areas of the city, how to do that. In our cities, we have, for example, in Trondheim, we have an industrial district that has a few beautiful new office buildings that are very close to zero energy, but it also has a lot of old warehouses that are rather leaky. And in the other case, in Limerick, we are looking at the old Georgian district, which has a lot of old buildings that have very limited ability to be upgraded. And currently also a lot of the heritage protection doesn't allow you to do anything too much to the buildings. So you need to find ways to have limited energy measures on the building themselves, to install a little bit of solar panels as far as you're allowed based on the current regulations, and then get something else from outside buildings or from outside areas that are not used, and to try your best to make it work from wherever you can get the energy. And the idea with the positive energy districts is that we will not get everything renovated. The renovation wave that Europe wants, it will still mean that we have to, maybe David can answer that better, but that we have to accelerate the refurbishment rates by a factor of 5 or 20 or something like that. So the idea here is that we can have new buildings and upgrade them to the max, and then they can carry other buildings where it doesn't make sense to upgrade. So the idea is here to scale this out to a mix.
All right. So before wrapping up, I would like to bring back into the session David and Leon, because we still have a question and answer from the previous Q&A. And so the question is I guess this was for David and Leon, but Dirk, feel free to jump in if you have something to add in there. Are those in charge of big building projects receptive to change? Are they willing to implement sustainable practices from the get-go of a project?
Please, Leon.
In my previous life, I wasn't a project manager for H2020 projects. I was actually a structural engineer, and a facade engineer. So maybe I can add something here. It depends on the client. So you will find that that clients, public clients or high prestige clients will be more likely to get on board. So if you're designing a university building from the start, it's very easy as the design team to say to the university, we want to make this a zero energy or positive energy building. But if you're just looking at a common developer who wants to put up some flats and make some money, that's a very different client and a very different thing you're trying to sell there. That's where policy comes in, and you really need governments to dictate the minimum level that a building has to be built to, and you need them to get that level at the right point so that the money is spent on the new building. I'm not going to talk about renovation. Maybe David would like to talk about renovation.
Yes, I'm agree with Leon about the depends of the client. And in this case, from our experience in European projects, the truth is that in terms of renovation, most of the buildings that join these kind of projects are public ones. Social housing is one of the main, let's say, receptors of these initiatives. Because I mean, they use the kind of this innovation and also EU support on budget and so on to refurbish the whole building. I mean, the thing is when there is one only owner, it is much easier than when you have to spread the different, let's say, benefits in many owners of the building. Let's talk about a big residential building. But at least in terms of certifications, let's say, to put on a label on the building, let's say BREEAM, LEED, and so on, private companies or project, let's say, investors are looking at these kind of certifications and more in deep on the kind of solutions that they can obtain from the benefits, let's say, in terms of to increase the price of the house or the value of the residence. I think it's more or less more private companies are joining this kind of projects, but well, our experience is that the public ones are most, let's say, available to join this kind of consortiums.
There's that customer side thing as well, as you said, David. If you have good social acceptance of high energy efficiency as it's something that you want to have in the building that you buy, in the apartment that you buy, then there's more incentive for the developers to pursue that goal. So as we say, it's not just one person that drives the innovation, it's everyone.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's much easier if you have public owners or at least one single owner. We kind of made our life a bit harder in that way in this project. But again, the public ones also see the non-monetary value. so they can take these societal goals into account in a better way that some smaller private developers might be able to do. So then also the change of regulation is something that policy should do, that we cannot do out of these projects. We can show how things could be built and could be integrated. But at one point it becomes again the societal issue, and it needs the systemic approach of new regulations of what buildings are supposed to do and which standards you need to build them to. So it's again this mix of systemic and individual approach. The individual approach will only get you so far for a few key buildings, which we have, but again, that fuzzes out rather quickly.
Okay, super. Thank you. So I would just like to thank again David, Leon, and Dirk for the great insights and for taking the time to joining us today. That was very, very interesting. We still have a few questions left there, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So for those who are interested, the Transform Smart Cities and Communities will continue tomorrow and on Friday. Tomorrow in particular, we'll have a panel discussion looking at smart streets. So the link to join the session will be the same as used today, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow. So thanks again, David, Leon, and Dirk, and thank you to our audience again for attending the session today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Nice to see you all.